I'm Alex Bell. Thank you for streaming with us. This June, Californians will head to the polls to help decide who could become the state's next governor. While the final decision comes in November, for now, 9 leading Democratic hopefuls and several Republicans are in the race. To help you get to know them and what they say they'd bring to the job, I sat down with the Democratic candidates at the state Democratic convention, and we'll also do the same with the Republican Party at their convention. To keep things fair, I drew their names at random for these interviews. First, you will hear from Tony Thurmond, followed by Eric Swalwell, Javier Becerra, Katie Porter, Antonio Villaraigosa, Betty Yee, Ian Calderon, and Matt Mahan, as well as Tom Steyer. For people that are meeting you for the first time, why are you deciding to run for governor?
Yeah, you know, our state's facing the biggest affordability crisis ever. So many challenges around homelessness. And I want to give working Californians a tax credit so that you all have more money for those, expenses like groceries, gas, and housing. I love this state. I've served it for 18 years as an elected official. I believe I have the experience and a vision to serve, and I want to help our state be better.
Now, if you are elected, what are your top 3 priorities going to be the first year in office?
We have to make sure that people can afford to have a home, and so as governor, I'm going to provide down payment assistance programs. I have a very unique housing plan that will allow us to build 2 million units of housing over the next few years. It uses surplus property that exists on school campuses in every county in our state. There are 75,000 acres of land ready for development. So it will be housing, it will be helping our homeless. As I said, I'm working to get $10 billion for building affordable housing and helping the 10,000 unaccompanied homeless minor youth who are on their own, who need help. I support a single-payer health care program and fighting back against Donald Trump. You know, this reckless immigration policy that we have seen is devastating our communities. I'm working on legislation that would put a tax on any company that operates an ICE detention center. And as governor, I'll work with Congress to abolish ICE and to create a pathway to citizenship for those who just want to work and pay taxes here. California
has spent billions addressing homelessness, but yet it still remains a huge problem in our state. What would you do differently to address homelessness?
I think there has to be accountability in how those dollars get spent, and we have to make sure if there's any waste or abuse that we put a spotlight on that and take care of that. So I think that for every dollar we spend for programs for those who are unhoused, we have to require that the participants participate in mental health and substance abuse programs. I'm also working on legislation right now that would put a measure on the ballot for Californians to vote on that, if passed, would give us $10 billion to build more housing. And I think a big portion of that, if passed, would need to go to helping those who are homeless.
Do you think that California has gone too far, not far enough, or struck the right balance when it comes to criminal justice reform?
You know, when I was on the city council in Richmond, that city was considered the most dangerous city per capita in the state of California. And we approached it in a way where we had a combination approach for how we address crime and safety. And today, violent crime has been significantly reduced. We did this through adding more police. You have to have police in your community. Someone has to answer the call when a crime has been committed. But you can't police or arrest your way out of the problems that we are seeing. You have to also have intervention programs. And as a council member, as a legislator, I've grown programs to provide paid employment training opportunities as a way of keeping people out of engaging in criminal activity. You do have to have diversion programs that give someone a chance at a second chance. But we have to recognize that there has to be accountability for people's actions,
For people that are meeting you for the first time, why would you say that you're running to be the governor of California?
Well, next governor has 2 jobs. The first is to keep the president and his troops and his ICE agents out of our streets, out of our homes, out of our lives. I've done that work as a former prosecutor, but also someone who's been a part of every major investigation against Donald Trump, from the Russia investigation to both impeachments to leading the January 6th effort that exists now. I've got a lawsuit, the only one that survived the new presidency, me and the January 6th officer. So I know how to go on offense as he chases immigrants in California through the fields and factories where they work. And as governor, I'll go on offense every single day. Not why I want to do the job. That's what you have to do. The second part is what I really want to do, which is to lower the costs. I was a planning commissioner and a city council member in Dublin, where I grew up. It was a place of low income, lower expectations, but when I came back home, we built like crazy. We attracted new small businesses and ultimately higher paying tech and biotech jobs. And we saw the schools get better, the streets get safer, and the quality of life go up. They used to call us Scrublin when I was growing up there. They don't call us Scrublin anymore. It's one of the best places to live in California. I want to do that all over the state.
Now, if you were to be elected, what would be your top 3 priorities your first year in office?
Yeah, it's going to be increasing revenue for the state so that we can pay for our health care and education obligations. It's going to be meeting our housing need, particularly apartments and first-time homebuyer homes. And it's going to be going on offense against the administration so that the most vulnerable Californians are protected.
California has spent billions in addressing homelessness. What would you do differently to address this?
I don't see it as a resource challenge. We've put a lot of resources in this. And so I'll focus particularly on the nonprofit and faith-based community where they're already doing the work rather than creating a new state program, surge resources to what they've done. Governor Newsom led the way with Prop 1 that created a lot of funding in mental health. We're going to expand on that. But I know personally from having a family member who was homeless and chasing him through the Tenderloin in this city in San Francisco, that too often we give all of the rights to the person in the equation who's least able to take care of themselves or make decisions. And that relates to the severely ill and the severely addicted. I want to work with the legislature to do the really hard part and make a policy change as it relates to who has the rights to decide the care that they get.
Do you think California has gone too far, not far enough, or struck the right balance when it comes to criminal justice reform?
I'm a former prosecutor. I'm a son of a cop, brother to cops, and I know that paramount in our community is to protect Californians. And that's why I work to protect them from ICE agents who are chasing them through the streets. That's also why I'm endorsed by the California the Police Chiefs Association and the firefighters. And I supported Prop 36 back in 2024. I want to make sure that people who were committing this mass retail crime in our communities, were held accountable. But I also know that most individuals who commit crimes are worthy of redemption. Redemption that I would work with them to find when I sat in the courtroom as a prosecutor, and as governor, redemption that I'll work with them to find, as a leader of the state.
For the people that are meeting you for the first time, why are you deciding to run for governor?
Alex, we have to return California to what I grew up with, where a construction worker with a 6th grade education and a clerical worker who didn't come to this country till she married my dad when she was 18 could actually send the 3 sisters I had and myself to college or the military. They could actually buy a house, a small house, and then they could retire, not in Utah or Idaho or Arizona, but here in California. We need that back. And I want young families to believe that with me as governor, that's what they'll have.
If elected, what are your top 3 priorities your first year in office?
Well, one has to be more housing. We have to build more housing. Everyone is saying that because it's absolutely true. We have to make it more affordable to live in California. 2, I believe healthcare is indispensable. And just because we have the man-made disasters coming from Washington, D.C., where Donald Trump is cutting access to healthcare through Medi-Cal, through the Affordable Care Act, we're not going backwards. We're going to continue to move forward to give people access to care at affordable prices. And then 3, I'm the first in my family to have a college education. I'm going to make sure that we continue to improve K through 12. And we start doing preschool because we have to get kids ready to learn and ready to lead.
California spends billions addressing homelessness, yet this still remains a major problem in our state. What would you do differently to address homelessness?
First thing is accountability, making sure that the monies that we send from the state to our cities and our counties shows results. Because I think too often and more, Californians don't believe we're getting results for the money we're putting into homelessness. Secondly, we'll try to work with those cities and counties, but it won't just be on housing, it'll also be on mental health. It'll be on social services because a lot of these folks are homeless, not just because they lost their shelter from before or they lost their job, but because mentally, physically, they weren't capable of keeping that job and keeping that home. The third thing I will do, and has less to do with the homelessness issue directly, is on my watch as governor, if you have shelter, a roof over your head, I want to guarantee you that you're not going to lose it if you're a working Californian. If you work hard, you have a roof over your head, but you're barely making ends meet, you're paycheck to paycheck, I'd rather make sure that we are investing in you to keep you housed than see you go on the streets and then have to pull you off the streets to get you housed because it costs so much more money to pull someone off the streets and get them housed than keeping someone who is in a home in that place.
Do you think that California has gone too far, not far enough, or struck the right balance on criminal justice reform?
It really depends on what the areas are. We were at one point with 3 strikes laws going way too far. At the same time, if you get too lenient, then you make it impossible to be able to try to get people back on the right path. What I think we have to do is take a look at Prop 36, for example. Prop 36 says we want to make sure we're tough on people who are committing crime, but we also want to make sure that we can get them off the path of committing crime. If we don't provide the services that you need, whether it's mental health, drug addiction services, then you're going to keep them on that path. So let's do what we know works. Provide people with the services that let them rehabilitate and get on the right path. That way we can keep people out of prison and in a job.
For people that are meeting you for the first time, why are you deciding to run for governor of California?
I'm running for governor of California to bring down costs for regular Californians. Affordability has become a big buzzword, but people don't need politicians telling them that life is unaffordable. They know. I'm a single mom of 3 teenagers. I push the grocery cart. I pay the bills. I fill up my minivan with gas. So I know what it's like to see your expenses go up and dollars not just stretch far enough. Affordability has been my life's work, studying families pushed into bankruptcy by medical debt or job loss, running a statewide foreclosure prevention program for then Attorney General Kamala Harris. So we need big solutions on affordability. People aren't leaving California because they're $5 or $10 short. They're leaving California because they are hundreds and hundreds of dollars away from being able to take care of their family the way they want.
And if you were to be elected, what would be your top 3 priorities your first year in office?
We have to look at what are families' biggest expenses. So they are housing, first and foremost. It takes up most of people's budget. So building more housing, building housing much more quickly. We build 2 years slower in California than in Colorado. We can do better. We're the most innovative state in the world, in the country, so we can innovate in how we build housing. Different construction techniques, different materials. My second priority is free childcare for every Californian. You can talk to any kind of economist from the far left to the far right, and they will all say that bringing down the cost of childcare is the biggest thing we could do to make our economy grow and accelerate. And then the third thing is we talk about affordability, and I've taken on big corporations and greedy corporations with my whiteboard in Congress, but one of the things we can do for affordability is change government's role in it. So to that end, I will eliminate state income tax for Californians making less than $100,000. That is a real affordability solution. We can deliver it right away.
And I do want to talk about homelessness. California has spent billions trying to address this big issue. What would you do differently to address homelessness?
It's really hard to solve a problem when the problem's getting bigger. So we have to focus on preventing people from becoming homeless. That is really important. Well, we're not right now. We're putting all of our money in helping those who have experienced long-term homelessness. Those people are important. They're Californians, and we need to get them into permanent supportive housing. But homelessness and the path to get there are other intervention points that are much less expensive and much more humane. So things like rapid rehousing, eviction prevention strategies, these work. They're cheaper, and they stop people from ever having to live on our streets.
Do you think that California has gone too far, not far enough, or has struck the right balance when it comes to criminal justice reform?
We're definitely moving in the right direction on criminal justice reform, particularly in terms of looking back at what are the consequences of our 3-strike law. In terms of retail theft, which has been a big issue, in terms of street crime, prevention is always going to be the first strategy, because it's not just about catching the person and punishing them and they commit a crime. We all think that should happen. It is about making sure that people feel confident that they can walk down the street safely. They can go to a playground with their kids and be safe. We've passed Prop 36. That's focused on punishment. We need punishment. But we really need to dig in on prevention and making our streets feel safe.
For people that are meeting you for the first time, why would you say that you're deciding to run for California governor?
I'm a proven problem solver. I've said that this state has given me more than I could have ever imagined. My grandpa came with a shirt on his back from León, Guanajuato, Mexico, with a dream. I tell folks, never in my lifetime did I ever think I'd be Speaker of the California State Assembly or Mayor of Los Angeles. But the one thing I know, we also face big challenges. Challenge number one is affordability. Challenge number two, right with number one, is the threat to our democracy posed by Donald Trump. We need a proven problem solver. Everybody's going to talk well, including in these interviews, but I'm somebody that's actually done it, and that's what I'm running on.
Now, if you were to be elected, what would be your top 3 priorities your first year in office?
Well, priority number one is to make sure that we're living within our means. The next governor is going to face an $18 to $30 billion deficit, according to the legislative analyst. The idea that we just could cut our way out of that is just a pipe dream. Now, we need a grown-up who will make the tough calls, but we also got to grow our economy. We got to address the fact that this is the toughest state to do business in the United States of America, and small business is suffocating in this state. So we got to grow our economy, and we've got to address the big challenges, the challenge of homelessness, the challenge of safety, good schools. We need a governor that's going to focus on the basics. Get, common sense, competence, and a course correction.
What would you do differently to approach homelessness?
I built more affordable workforce and market rate housing than the 12 years before me. So we need a builder. But let's be clear. We can't keep on throwing money at the problem. We have to understand that we need to invest in what works and stop doing what doesn't. I've said I don't believe in criminalizing homelessness. I do believe in compassion, but I don't believe in chaos. And when you're selling drugs in front of cops, that's chaos. So we need an approach that focuses on providing a network of investment in services and housing. But the average house for homeless right now costs $850,000. Reporters can't pay that. Their children can't pay that. So what I've said is tiny homes are being built in LA for $100,000. We've got to be smart about how we expend these resources and not just throw money at the problem.
Let's talk about criminal justice reform. Do you think California has gone too far, not far enough, or has struck the right balance when it comes to criminal justice reform?
I led the fight against 3 strikes you're out when I was in the legislature. I'm against the death penalty, but I tell people, I believe in accountability. When you keep on stealing and you're on drugs and you get arrested and you refuse drug treatment, the first time, the second time, the third time, you're going to jail. That's why I supported Prop 36. We can't be ideologues with these things. The next governor's number one priority has to be public safety. That means fire and police. We've got to focus on protecting the public, and I will, because I have a record on it.
For people that are meeting you for the first time, why are you deciding to run for governor of California?
I am a native Californian who has just seen a lot since I grew up here as a daughter of immigrants in terms of just opportunities becoming fewer for many Californians. And so I am running to really apply my fiscal and financial experience to deal with the affordability issues. And we can't really tackle them unless we really stabilize our state budget. And so just being very clear about the work that has to be done and my background and experience being very relevant to that.
Now, if you were to be elected, what would be your top 3 priorities your first year in office?
Top 3 has to be really stabilizing the budget, because as we're trying to deal with our investments in housing and healthcare, our environment, our schools, we need to know that we have that stability in our budget. And with the budget deficits we're facing, the federal funding cuts that are looming, we need to have really an all-of-the-above strategy where we're going to have to look at how we make cuts to make California government more efficient. We're going to have to look at how we raise revenue to be sure that we're keeping our safety net programs intact, particularly the Medi-Cal cuts that are looming, but also how we look at investing in our communities and our people. Because one of the things that we don't talk enough about is how do we invest in California where we grow our economy and hopefully develop more resilience against some of these threats that we're seeing near term.
California has spent billions of dollars trying to address the homelessness crisis, yet the problem persists. I mean, you do see it on city streets.
Yes.
What would you do differently to address this?
I think we've had a lot of dollars that have been put towards homelessness, but what I would do is to be sure that we are very clear about the roles and responsibilities among the state, the counties, and the cities, to be sure there's coordination, to be sure we have accountability for the dollars that we put out there in terms of what kinds of systems are we creating that hopefully will be there for the long term to keep people, one, from becoming homeless, and then two, for the unhoused, how we are able to give them the supportive services, how we are going to be sure that we are moving people into interim supportive housing as quickly as possible, then into permanent supportive housing, stable rental situations, and yes, even home ownership. And so I think when we can see a continuum like that, where we have accountability at every point, we can see our dollars going much further and actually being successful at helping people become more housing secure.
Do you think California has gone too far, not far enough, or has struck the right balance when it comes to criminal justice reform?
We've progressed a lot in terms of just looking at what's happened when we've had early releases from our state prisons. And when I look at the promising programs that are helping formerly incarcerated people, it's making an investment in holistic reentry programs where former incarcerated people really are gaining the life skills, but also the economic opportunities for jobs and stable housing. I hope to invest more in that, particularly since Governor Newsom has been closing more prisons, that these are the kinds of programs that people can transition into and be much more ready to re-enter communities. But we also have, I know Prop 36 was just on the ballot, and so with that, I would really prioritize funding more drug treatment capacity, which we don't have around the state. As the courts are deciding that people are going to be diverted into drug treatment, I want to be sure that those slots are available for them.
For people that have never met you before, talk to me about why you decided to run for governor.
I jumped into this race because we have to do better in California, and I know that we can because in San Jose we have led the way for the state in reducing crime, reducing homelessness, and like most Californians, I'm frustrated that over the last 6 years, spending in the state has gone up by 75%, and the outcomes are not improved by 75%. In some areas, things have gotten worse. We have to do better. I know that we can, but it's not easy. We have to build the political will to hold government accountable for reducing the bureaucracy, eliminating the programs and policies that don't work, and make sure we're delivering for working and middle-class families.
If you were to be elected, what would be your top 3 priorities your first year in office?
My focus is on reducing costs and increasing incomes. On the cost side, largely because of the amount of bureaucracy, process, fees that we have imposed in government, we have the highest housing costs, the highest energy costs in the country. We need to reduce the amount of bureaucracy and regulation in the state. We have to attract investment and good high-paying jobs. And right now, there is a real challenge we're facing in the state where we are demonizing and over-regulating. It's too expensive to do anything, so jobs are going elsewhere. And we have to get back to basics to bring back jobs and increase incomes while reducing costs, particularly for housing and energy.
We know that California has spent billions of dollars trying to address the homelessness issue, but it still persists. You can definitely still see it on a lot of city streets, even here in San Francisco. What exactly would you do differently to address this issue?
Well, we need to stop funding failure. In San Jose, we've taken a very different approach, and we have the results to show it. We've built a nation-leading model around prevention, short-term rental assistance with case management to help people when they fall on hard times, to prevent homelessness. Those are the best dollars we can spend. We've invested in shelter and interim housing, and when it's available, we require that people use it, and we get people stabilized indoors, connected to services sooner so that they don't become chronically homeless. When we get upstream of what we see on our streets and intervene earlier and more effectively, we reduce a lot of suffering and we actually save a lot of money.
Do you think California has gone too far, not far enough, or has struck the right balance when it comes to criminal justice reform?
Well, it really depends on the crime. I don't believe that our jails and prisons should be our de facto mental health hospitals. I do think we need to build mental health hospitals again and have inpatient treatment and get people into the care that they need. But as we focused on reducing the jail population, we didn't do a very good job of creating an alternative, other interventions, other programs that work. We have mental health diversion in the state that is not working very well, where people are being diverted from a criminal pathway into a program where there's very little accountability and we're seeing repeat crime. And when someone's coming back and cycling through a second time, a third time, that should be a signal to all of us that something's broken.
For people that are meeting you for the first time, why are you deciding to run for governor of California?
Well, I'm running for governor because Californians can't afford to live in California anymore. The cost of living is at a place led by housing costs, but going to multiple parts of people's budgets where people literally are leaving the state and literally can't pay the bills. And that is a huge government failure. And I think it's critical that the government address it and the governor addresses it with urgency.
Now, if you were to be elected, what would be your top 3 priorities your first year in office?
The number one issue about affordability is housing, because it's the biggest bill that everybody faces. It's up to 50% of your pay. So the first thing we're going to have to address is housing. One thing we can do in the short run is put in rent control, and I would do it. The second thing that I think is critical is, look, our electricity costs are a critical element of family costs. Californians pay twice as much for electricity as other people around the United States. That's unacceptable. I've talked about the need to have a different oversight at the Public Utilities Commission, and I've also talked about the idea of local competition for the electric monopolies that are actually providing that electricity. And the third thing that I would do that I think is very different from what everyone else is talking about, call a special election to close a corporate real estate tax loophole that's been on the books since 1978, that Donald Trump himself benefits from. By our estimate, we'll bring in $22 million a year to local governments for education and healthcare.
California has spent billions of dollars trying to fix the homelessness crisis, but yet you can see the problem really persists throughout the state. What would you do differently as governor?
So we have a homeless plan which involves getting people into permanent housing, which takes on average 7 years and costs $750,000 a key. If you just take a step back and ask yourselves, can that possibly work? The answer is no. So one of the things I'm absolutely determined to do is to use emergency interim housing. Get people off the street. They don't have to be clean. They can bring their dog. There's, mutual, group dining, group laundry, and they're safe.
Do you believe that California has gone too far, not far enough, or has struck the right balance on criminal justice reform?
About 70% of Californians voted for Prop 36, and Prop 36 was basically a couple things, but one of the things it was hugely about was treatment instead of incarceration for nonviolent criminals. But it meant that actually the goal was going to be to rehabilitate, to prepare you for society, and that's the kind of thing I actually believe. For nonviolent criminals, well, the state has not funded it. Absolutely, we need to incarcerate violent people who are going to be a danger to people in their communities. But for people who aren't violent criminals, rehabilitating them, treating them, is a much more successful and effective way to deal with crime.
Now, we are going to keep these candidate profiles going. We are working to sit down with the Republican candidates at their convention in April as we continue our coverage of the race for California's next governor. I'm Alex Bell. As always, thank you for streaming with us.